Y'all ever just get into a random building rut because you don't know what you want to use? Well, today I've got the secret formula to cure that. You know why? Because I'm going to show you some non-NU Pokemon that are actually pretty reasonable to use in the tier. Some of these aren't as deep cut as the others. I tried to keep it though to mons that are kind of like not heavy meta at least, because I think that's a lot more fun. So, because if I talk about Decidueye, that mod is PU, right? But everyone knows Decidueye is like really strong right now in NU. So we're trying to use mons in this video that are not necessarily that prevalent. So, of course, y'all enjoy content like this, where I give you the secret sauce to becoming the best NU team builder, player, etc. of all time. Of course, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I want to hit 9K subs. I really do. It would make every dream of mine come true. So, help a brother out. If you're already subscribed, leave a like. Comment down below what your favorite Pokemon to use in NU is. That is not some, like, boring, you know, Mian Chao Flygon type Pokemon. I'm trying to see something. So, we start off with Cetitan. If you watched yesterday's video, and if you haven't watched it, go watch it right now. I can wait. I got all evening. You done watching yet? Okay, we can continue now. You watched yesterday's video, you will remember that Evito versus 3D. Evito brought a snow team with Cetitan, and I was experimenting with Snow Sun like several months ago, so this is a, you know, long meta past. It's back when we had Thunderous. To give you an idea. And I thought it was pretty decent back then. It never really continued getting usage at any point. We would see it pop up like once in a team tournament. People would kind of be like, oh, that's neat. And then nothing would happen. But I do believe that Snow is a pretty like cool type of team that you can try and use. Cetitan is, of course, a super scary sweeper because Belly Drum is one of the most insane moves ever. Since you have natural support with Abomasnow, it gives you the, of course, the defense boost. It also gives you Aurora Veil. Potentially could even eject pack into you if it wants to seed some extra turns for its weather. And then, you know what? It ain't too bad. I'm not really entirely sure what the best... Terra Dark can't be right. I think... So I put Terra Dark there partly just for random Prankster Encore. The problem is Grafaiai is not real. So I'd probably say Terra Ground. I think you just want to make sure you have the strongest possible move to hit Aldi and Taurus Aqua with, and of course this will still let you hit. Okay, strongest move technically is Play Rough, but this kind of goes into like my overall point. I do think there's some options here. Like you could probably do Liquidation. You don't need it because Knockoff does just as much to Rotom Heat. And by just as much, I mean it's an OHKO, but it's probably still like fine, right? Like at the end of the day, right? It's still coverage. Knockoff, I think you have to have. I think if anything, you're running EQ most of the time just to make sure you've got enough damage versus the other steals. So you think like Registeel. Really, it's Registeel. I feel like the other steals just die to knock. I guess Klefki, too. Klefki would be able to hit you with a Foul Play, and that would, you know, wash. It's also nice to be Terra Ground because you then have an immunity to Keys' T-Wave. So I think there's a good amount of reason to just keep EQ on here. You could also drop Ice Spinner for Ice Shard like we saw Evito have Ice Shard. Just gives you a little bit of extra leeway if you're running out of your snow turns. And hey, once again, it does technically synergize pretty nicely with the idea of just going Eject Pack Abomasnow with like Leaf Storm. And trying to say, alright, I'm gonna get my Veil up. I'm gonna pivot on out. We're just gonna try to win this game as quickly as we can. Next up, we got Flamigo. Recently banned from PU, so naturally, anytime a Pokemon is in here, I feel like it just by default does gain a little bit of recognition. You may wonder, Rabia, why aren't you including Raikou? Shut the hell up. Don't talk about that Pokemon. But Rabia, why aren't you including Dreadnought? Because I already did a Dreadnought video. Was it like a month ago? Yes. But you know what? Close enough for me. Flamigo, now, admittedly, Flamigo's a bit of a tough sell, in the sense of Mian Chao being better in every conceivable way. Except for one. That one way is the Vileplume matchup. Now, it's not to say Mian Chao can't just beat Vileplume. It totally can with Triple Axle or Ice Spinner, whichever one you feel like you're running on any given day. But Flamigo just having a stab attack that, you know, Plume doesn't wall is a pretty big difference. Because it means that Plume can't really scout as easily. Like, versus Xiao, unless I'm misremembering the head calc, you don't die to Axel, at least if it's like Scarf Xiao. I think you do tank. It's not pretty, but I believe you do. We can even check. Why not, man? Let's look at this for a moment. I'm trying to see something. That's Stone Edge. That definitely doesn't kill. Because I know you live Ice Spinner. Yeah, you live Axel pretty fine. You even live it from Life Orb most of the time. Yeah, if there's rocks up, it starts to get into, you know, roll range, but it's very nice for Plume's sake that Xiao doesn't really dunk on it. Flamigo's completely different, because if I just want to throw off my stab attacks the entire game, well, Plume can never actually check me, and if I Terra Flying, Glowbro doesn't really like checking you either. It's not like the end of the world. Like, as you can see here with this calc that I will very slowly type because I'm tired, leave me alone. Terra Flying Brave Bird. You have to have rocks up for it to be a 2-shot, and it also has to not have boots. The problem is, if it doesn't have boots, it probably has a helmet, and you take 5 million damage in recoil. But you see the point here, right? It is a pretty nice benefit to be able to nuke Plume compared to me and Xiao. Also, it just means since you're a flying type, you have a little bit of extra utility. Like, you actually resist fighting, so unlike the honorable Mian Xiao at turn 1, where you both close combat, you just see who wins a speed tie, Flamigo doesn't give a shit. I resist your CC. I'm immune to Flygon EQ. Both of those are pretty cool traits. Obviously, the drop-off is that you do have a more long-term susceptibility to chip. Like, yeah, you don't take Spike's chip, but I mean, Mian Xiao doesn't either because of Regenerator. And you got to deal with this terrible, terrible recoil as well on Brave Bird that you're not recovering back. Like, if Mian Xiao was using Brave Bird, 1, I'd wonder how you had Brave Bird, but 2, you'd be chill because you'd just regenerate it off. And obviously for Terra types, you could do fighting as well. You know, naturally, I wouldn't blame you if you want Scrappy CC to just be spammed off harder. I just think in-use fighting checks are a little too good for that. Terra Stellar is probably fine too. So you get a one-time boost to both of these and even U-turn. Roost, by the way, is literally just here because there's nothing else worth putting. Like, I mean, this is feasibly a knockoff switch. You could probably get away with Sword Stance or something like a Throat Chop even. Maybe even something like Tailwind. But there's really just not a lot. And then also, someone that I was asking about Flamigo and what to run, they were saying Adamant. I don't know if I vibe with Adamant a ton, but admittedly, it's not like you really lose a whole bunch in terms of the speed tiers here. Shout out to Glitchwick City. There's not really Scarfers in between here. Like, base 80 Mons with Scarf. I guess Legion would be the big one, right? You're actually a point slower. That's dastardly. Yeah, I think that's enough to make me say, no, not Lax. Jolly probably always just for that. But I think, again, it's just more a matter of if you're okay with seeding that, then who gives a shit, right? Altaria. NU doesn't have defoggers, and Altaria, it's not a good mon, but it has a couple things going for it that at least make it palatable. One, it learns defog. That automatically gives you a niche. It also actually has some decent synergy with the steel types. Like, Altaria plus Copper Raja is a very reasonable core defensively. Now, it's Altaria, so you are handicapping yourself quite a bit, and I would say Raja has its own issues too, but I do think this concept is a workable one. Plus, it lets Copper actually run lefties instead of the poverty heavy-duty boots Copper Rajas we're starting to see run around, which I think's good. And then defensively, you are actually a really solid answer to Water Tauros. Stone Edge is just not a move worth running on it. You don't hit anything. If Noivern was in the tier, it would probably run Stone Edge a good amount, but Noivern ain't in the tier. And otherwise, I mean, I'd rather have, you know, obviously you're going dual stabs, and you want Aqua Jet. The only set that would ever drop Jet is if you're Scarf. And then what? You're either bulk up or you have poison type coverage. So it's EQ or Zen Headbutt. So Altaria ends up walling that mon pretty consistently. It's a good Scald switch in too because of natural cure, so I can always switch into like Vaporeon and Will-O-Wisp. Just gotta make sure they're not an Ice Beamer. If they are, then you probably live 1, but you're going to be taken out of commission for the rest of the game. But I mean, hey, free Wisp is always good. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to say about Altaria beyond that. It's a defogger, and it checks Water Taurus. Those two traits alone probably have it to where this mon could be ranked on the VR pretty easily at like a C rank. Terra type, I think Steel's just naturally good because of what you're weak to. Fairy and Dragon, hey, may as well cover those weaknesses. Poison is probably okay, just because of it being a good defensive typing. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really see a world where I Terra this. Like, maybe I'd Terra into a Fairy type sometimes, because this would make you a little better into Flygon. You block Scale Shot, and I mean, EQ will still hurt, but blocking Scale's more important. Plus, you still can check fighters, not named Toxicroak. Taurus probably starts doing a lot more to you at this point, because 75-90 is not exactly inspiring bulk, but by that point, you've probably made it waste a lot of its HP anyway with wave crashing into you. So, I mean, if you've just gotten enough chip, then I think you're pretty chill. Fire Spin's also going to be fine on this. Like, if you want to go Perish Trap, Roost, and then, I don't know, Brave Bird, maybe still have Defog. I'm sure it's okay, but that'd be, like, stall specific. Next up is Goodra. Goodra getting a little bit more attention from Mr. Phantomistics. I'll give a shout out to this Pokemon as a result. It's not really hard meta. I don't even know how much it's really getting into the meta, per se. But at the very least, Goodra's got a couple things, and namely, you're talking about its comparison to Dragalge. So the big thing is you're a little better into Bronzong. Because with Dragalge, if you want to do anything to Zong, you're either ceding the fact that all you do is flip turn the whole game after Dracoing it, which to be fair is pretty reasonable. If you're an offensive Dragalge, even and you're just like specs Draking, it's gonna do 500 billion. And you're plenty happy with that. Maybe even throw Shadow Ball in there. The problem is, you know, these are just, it's not as good as what Goodra can do as like a general use mon. One, Goodra's like naturally just faster anyway, so you have like some better matchups through that. But two, Goodra gets just broken knockoff plus toxic as a combo, so you could always just knock Bronzong as it switches into you, and then you beat it down anyway with Fire Blast. I think Mon just does not answer you very consistently, and this goes for any other Steel type too. The other big thing that I think plays into Goodra's favor right now, though, is the Fairy types of the tier are probably at one of their low points. Like, if you look at them, Diancie you still see a lot on the ladder, but it's definitely not a great mon anymore. I mean, ever since Bronzong became top of the meta, Diancie has just not been worth considering seriously on many teams. There's probably some potential for other sets, but that's a topic for another video. Klefki, probably the best fairy in the tier at this point, and there's not a ton that it can do back to Goodra anyway. Because most keys sets at this point are like T-Wave, Foul Play, Magnet Rise, Spikes. You don't really see a lot of play rough, so that's kind of a jover. Screamtail, most of the time, from my experience, is just being used for hyper offense, and it doesn't even run a fairy move. It runs Boom Burst, Calm Mind, Psychic Noise, Fire Blast. So congrats. You probably do get through Goodra, but you're switching in, you're getting knocked. It's not gonna do anything, but then you're getting toxicked, and then I'm switching. Like, that's all there is. Maybe it has Encore. Okay, sure, whatever. I'll switch. Sylveon, like I said, I mean, kind of just a fact of this mon not being hard meta anymore. And even then, Sylveon doesn't want to catch a Toxic because it kind of just ruins everything it wants to do. Any other fairy? I could mention real quick Florges, which honestly probably should have been in the video. Just note that Florges is in fact a reasonable pick in the tier, as like a side grade / slight downgrade to Sylveon. They do a lot of the same, except choice item sets on Florges, you have access to Trick. So there you go. But all that to say, yeah, Goodra, a much better spot now for it than it used to be, because Knock Toxic is just infinitely better for getting through the same checks that it shares with Dragalge, but with fairy types dropping off, Goodra doesn't care nearly as much anymore about the meta at large. Dragalge, if fairy types were more prevalent to check dragons, you'd probably see Dragalge a lot more. Because then, like, if steals are at a premium, Dragalge's gonna feast. Because it's just gonna get to Draco everything, and the few things it can't Draco, it'll Sludge Bomb. That's simply not the case in this meta. Mudsdale. I really don't know what move I want to put here. I think Body Press may just be necessary to not lose to Flygon. Unless it's Terra Ghost. In which case, I thought about Roar too. There's a couple things I wanted to show off for Mudsdale as like options. I feel like this is fine. The main thing though that you're going to want to take into account here is Rest Talk. Why? Because Rest Talk Mudsdale just makes Muck a complete dead slot. I will switch into you forever. I get free turns to EQ, Body Press if I think a flyer's coming in, like a, Flygon for example. If I have Roar, then I can just phase you out, try and get some Spikes Chip going on, because you would probably only run Roar on this. I mean, I guess you could still have Roar if you're worried about Flygon more generally anyway. You just phase it out and you're like, alright, goodbye fraud. But this is a pretty cool niche for it. Also, of course, you could sit in front of something like a Spike's Overquill, even Sword Stance Overquill. It's not great because they can always go for their like Terra Water, and if they have Liquidation, you're gonna take a ton. But you won't die because you're a Mudsdale, you know? The Mud is very, very bulky. If you're worried about dying anyway, you just Terra and get out of the kill range. I'm getting this Adobe Acrobat pop-up. Get the hell out. Terra types as well. I mean, Dragon is just kind of what I defaulted to because this is the type of mon where Dragon gives you a lot of resistances you like, but you could definitely do Poison. I just think Poison's not necessary. I was gonna say Fairy. I'd probably do. Poison you could argue for just to check fighting types better if you're being forced into terastallizing. The problem is, I don't think you'd want to Terra for fighting types. I think if anything, you'd Terra for like Flygon. And even then, no, I wouldn't Terra for Flygon. I'd Terra for something else. What am I thinking of? It's really not that important. I'm not terastallizing this mon probably in minigames. But the idea here is just you're a very, very reliable answer into Alolan Muck, and a lot of teams struggle with that. You're also a great knockoff absorber. Think about Incineroar, you can pivot into that mon really, really easily. Threaten back with a strong EQ. And probably just rest up all the damage you took and then just sleep talk it, especially if you have Body Press. That's a 2/3 chance of smoking that dumb cat's pack. Gotta be a little careful of something like Decidueye, and like I said, even Terra Ghost Flygon could get awkward, but that's why we're talking about Roar. You just don't care nearly as much about some of these mons that may otherwise exploit you. Even something like a Nasty Plot Rotom Heat, I guess, could feasibly give you some issues. Or like an Air Balloon Croak. But say lovey. Scrafty! So, you're seeing some mons coming up that are, like I said, they're not exactly deep cuts. Like, we kind of been known that these mons were good in the tier. Scrafty, you actually have a lot of bulky water types present once again. And Scrafty does a great job into all of them. Just do not face the eternally special of Alluring Voice Vaporeon. You will be very sad. But Scrafty otherwise has a pretty nice spot in the meta. Partly too, just because it's a different dark type. And a lot of Incineroar Overcool structures start to look very samey over time. Scrafty gives you a little bit of a different perspective on the dark type slot for like a balance / bulky offense type team, which as a team builder I respect a lot and appreciate, because God forbid I build another team that has like 4 Pokemon I recognize from another team that either I just built or eternally passed for me to look at. It's always horrible when I recognize that. I hate it so much. But we move on. Bulk Up Scrafty's always just kind of been one of the most dishonorable Pokemon to bring in the eyes of a lot of people. And with Fairy types, once again, being at a low point, much like how Goodra benefits from that, Scrafty does too. Because your natural counterplay is just not there anymore. Fairies are always an immediate response, because even if you Terra a lot of the time, they still can reposition well enough to deal with this. Like whether you're Terra Poison or Steel, Poison generally better because of how many matchups it flips. You're pretty chill. Scrafty is a mon that I will show Dragon Dance for though as well, because I think DD Encore is just a really, really cool set, as we saw it from, I think, Stories in week 2, I think it was, of SCL. It didn't end up working out that game for her. I do think there was a little bit of a misplay on a sequence, but overall it's a really cool set just because of how well it does at shutting down opposing bulky mons, and it really makes your Stall matchup obscenely good. Now Stall isn't really common in NU, but this type of set just feasts on it, because there's just so little you can do to the Shed Skin Pokemon with Encore. I'd probably run Drain Punch. Yeah, I'd probably run Drain Punch. I think CC's still good, though. Hyper Offense probably just goes close combat, but I think generically you're gonna run Drain Punch. Scyther! Y'all already know why we're talking about it. Rabia, why didn't you include... What Pokemon was it? Hold on, I need to get the voice. Hey, Rabia, why didn't you include Dreadnought? You said you did it on Scyther. Why don't you said Dreadnought you didn't include because you did a video. Yeah? Okay. I forgot the part where I asked. So, Scyther. This mon is very quickly rising the ranks of NU. You're gonna see this mon randomly in like the A ranks in the VR soon, I swear to God. But it's genuinely such a strong hyper offense sweeper right now. Like, the thing is, it's so easy to build these teams in a way where steel types get overloaded too quickly. I basically set this point verbatim in when I covered Danny's game versus Eternally. But just, again, consider an HO team with like Flygon, Scyther, Chinchino, Toxtricity, and then like we'll throw, say, Uxie in there too, why not? That combination of mons, even if you don't have all of them, just put like 4 of those together. You are going to overwhelm the steel types. And I throw Flygon in here too, because Bronzong, right? Like it draws in Zong. And this really makes it very easy for Scyther to find a spot on those teams, but 2, sweep. Because a Violite makes your bulk actually good enough to where you can find the multiple turns you need. That's an issue I commonly will cite with some of the sweepers of the tier. I'm like, well, yeah, you're really scary if you're given 2 or 3 turns to do whatever you want. And Scyther is one of those mons that kind of requires it. DNC you could throw in there as well as a steel type chipper. So there you go. And it's also really nice too, because think about some of the most common Scarfers of the tier. Water Tauros, Mienshao, Flygon. I was gonna say Infernape for a second. Yeah, that'd be a massive lie. That mon isn't good at all. That mon is trash. But those 3 mons are ones that lock into moves that Scyther can really, really easily exploit, whether it's EQs, whether it's close combats, hell, whether it's knockoffs. I don't really care if I lose my Violite. If you want to go for it as I switch in, sure. And the fact that Chinchino is just such a good lead for offense really, really helps. The whole point of those teams is you just say, I don't care about entry hazards. I have Chinchino, I will just tidy them up, get them out of there, and I will preserve Scyther's Violite for the entire game. I will use Chinchino as well from that point, usually because it's a steel type that set the hazard. So I switch in. I could Encore if I want. I could tidy up immediately. I could knock immediately. I've had a lot of routes. I'm just going to use Chinchino though to trade. I just want some HP off of you, put you in range of my Scyther for later. Terra Grass I have here, because technically Hyper Offense kind of hates OTR DNC, and Terra Grass at least makes your Trailblaze a little stronger. So if you have a Sword Sense, you potentially can get through DNC. Electric, though, is one that I was originally wanting to test out, and is actually what Danny used. As y'all saw from the game we covered, Terra Electric Scyther just beats the hell out of Registeel. There's very little it can do other than predict you to Terra Electric and then EQ you on the play, but that's a tough read to make, because you just don't know what Terra type it's going to be. It gives you that resistance to Heavy Slam, it gives you a T-Wave immunity, and of course, too, Terra Electric, like I've talked about for some other mons, too, it gives you a very, very strong Kilowattrel roll matchup, too. Oh, also, once again, blocking out a Klefki T-Wave. Very cool. Paleo Taurus Blaze. So again, not really a deep cut, but more being brought up because I think the Aqua Bull has a lot of the spotlight on it right now for very good reason. But I believe that Fire Bull is not equally, but similarly a really strong pick. Say a lot of the same traits, just Intimidate, naturally really solid physical bulk, help you soft check a lot of threats, though of course you're trading off the Flygon matchup for probably just a better grass types matchup, I'd put it. So like Decid, Bramble, Loom. That's the main trade-off that you have to take there. But also having Will-O-Wisp is pretty neat, because unlike Water Tauros, where you're kind of just always having to throw off damage to try to get something done against your bulky water type switch-ins, I can at least Will-O-Wisp them early, and then think about CC spamming later. Even something like a Gligar, which will check me a lot better than it would a Water Tauros for very obvious reasons. I can Wisp it early, and then next time it tries to come in, I just start Raging Bulling it down. And it's just not that hard to beat long term, especially if I've got a knockoff Pokemon alongside me. And then another nice benefit too, when you face those bulky Incineroars with Will-O-Wisp, which you're going to see more of going forward, because without Cresselia in the tier, you just don't need Sword Stance as much on the specially defensive sets. It is nice to be able to go to my Tauros, which both water and fire Tauros are commonly used as instant checks. I can go into this guy and not worry about a Wisp. I'm immune to it. And then make them worry a lot with close combat. And of course, too, I don't even want to say the most important distinction, but one of the most important distinctions between the two Taurus forms is this one has a great Vileplume matchup. It's very similar to Flamigo. How we talked about Flamigo in comparison to Mienshao earlier. That's just another big reason you would try ever using this, because Vileplume is naturally a check to Water Taurus that is very hard to beat. You have to be like Banded Zen Headbutt. And newsflash, they don't run Banded Zen Headbutt very frequently. I've talked about it before as like I think it's a really good option because you essentially retain the same coverage anyway. I feel like there was one Mon that EQ hit that Zen didn't, but I can't remember it. I just remember suggesting at time, I was like, hey, why aren't we running Zen Headbutt? This shit hits everything, but also hits Plume. Oh, it's a Glowbro. So yeah, if you don't care about Glowbro, run Zen Headbutt. Uxie, so you thought Cresselia was gone? No, it just evolved into a faster Pokemon with Encore and Nasty Plot and Draining Kiss. Oh, and it has Psychic Noise now. I mean, reality is Uxie fills a very similar void to Cress on offense. You're just an obnoxious setup sweeper. There's so many variants to Uxie that I could talk about with setup, whether it's sub Nasty Plot, whether it's this one here, Encore Nasty Plot, like similar to Scrafty. You're just trying to mess up bulky teams with the Encore. Whether it's, throw stored power on here, whether you're talking about terrain Uxie, whether you're talking about a bulky EV spread, because, I mean, you can go max HP instead. Oh, I will say, put the 4 EVs into special defense. Just do not allow the Porygon Z users happiness if they're down low. Just don't let it happen. Give them the attack boost, man. There's a lot of variants to Uxie that you can use, but the main point to take is that this Mon offers hyper offense teams just an absurd amount of defensive presence, even without investing. If anything, I guess you could compare this variant too to the offensive Calm Mind Cresselia variants we started seeing, where they ran a whole bunch of special attack, legitimately just so, if they're having to throw off a Moonblast randomly, it does more to an Incineroar. Or if they're at +1, they can Terra Fairy and beat down Incineroar a lot more reliably than they would if they were, like, bulky with Terra Poison. But Uxie offers a ton of defensive utility. It, of course, helps out versus things like Water Tauros and Flygon, typically two of the most annoying monster hyper offense to deal with, just because of how they vibe check a lot of the Pokemon on the team through, priority, Intimidate in Taurus' case. Also good at, of course, drawing in Steel types like we talked about earlier. Even if you're just trying to weaken Dark types. Off the top of my head, can I think of something that helps? No. Decidueye's like the one. But definitely, like I said, not a deep cut, but a good one. And then we're going to finish the video. Gonna finish it with this demon. Now, admittedly, I do not know. I did not ask anyone for EVs beforehand. I just copied the set I saw stories use in a room tour. So I do not know what the optimal EVs are for Mr. Porygon 2 here. Can I make it? It's a Mr. to me anyway. Every Pokemon is a he in my natural conversations. Even Gardevoir. Even Lopunny. But the cool thing about Porygon 2 is what we talked about yesterday as well, where this Mon gives you a very funny answer to Oricorio. Thanks to Trace, you copy Dancer, meaning when that Mon decides to Quiver Dance, I Quiver Dance too! If they want a Terra, I have Thunder Wave for you now, and of course if you Terra Ground, well, I'm just Ice Beaming you. But also, I get, anytime you try to Revelation Dance on me, I get to go for my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Revelation Dance into Ice Beam combo. It's very funny. This Mon is just one of the most absurd hard counters possible. Not even hard counters, most absurd answers possible to Oricorio E, just because of how funny the sequences end up playing out. As I mentioned yesterday, I don't actually know how well the exchange goes, but I do know it goes well enough that a lot of people are using it as an answer. Is this some amazing Mon that you should be using on all your teams? Hell no. But what else does it offer you? Well, it checks Toxtricity, because you get to trace Punk Rock, and remember, Punk Rock gives you a slight resistance to sound moves. So I've got my massive bulk bolstered by Eviolite, and then I also get to trace Punk Rock, and I mean from there, obviously I'm Terra Blast ground here, so I could potentially get off absurd chip if the Toxtricity isn't just about to two-shot me. Or I could T-Wave a predicted switch. Obviously, too, I still check Shandy because I'm a normal type with Trace. So if they're Flash Fire, I will be tracing that. I will be blocking either your stab moves. It's going to be very, very fun. I'm going to really have a good time with it. If it's Volt Absorb Kilowattrel, I come in, I say, hello, you thought you were Volt switching? No, you're not. I mean, shit, dude, if it's a Monkey Dory and I trace Toxic Chain and they don't proc it as they switch, hey, what you switching into me when I got the Toxic Chain on deck? I will Ice Beam everything and I will poison your whole team and you will hate me. It's a very funny mod. But I hope all y'all enjoyed. Like I said, we got 10 Pokemon for y'all here. Look at that. Cetitan, Flamigo, Altaria 3, Goodra 4, Muds 5, Scrafty 6, Scyther 7, Taurus 8, Uxie 9, Porygon 2. That makes 10. I think all of these, like I said, some of them are more deep cut than others are. Some of these are already becoming pretty clearly part of the meta, but I still feel like they're rare enough to where they're still worth mentioning. Or it's like they're just now turning up frequently into the meta. So like Scyther, I'd label as that, but something like Decidueye, I would say that mon has been rising for a while now, so I don't really find it worth talking about here too much. But I hope all y'all enjoyed. I hope some of y'all find some inspiration for team building based on this video. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.